are live here at Star Wars Newsnet Live. My name is Tyler. Feeling pretty good tonight. I apologize to anyone if I feel a little bit like just glazed over. I just got out of my Oppenheimer session at the IMAX. But I'm joined with Brian, and first time guest today with us is Jay, here to talk some Star Wars books tonight. Brian, Jay, how you guys doing?
Doing good, man. Glad to see some
am.
people on, man.
Yeah, it's great to be here for my first time. Happy to talk about Star Wars books. Inquisitor Rise of the Red Blade just came out this week. And I was happy to do the review for that on our websites. Please feel free to check that out when you guys get a chance. But I'm sure we'll be also talking about that later on the show as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. I don't know. Are you guys big movie fans at all? Like, are you gonna go do the whole Oppenheimer Barbie? See, it's in my head already. Are you guys gonna watch either one of those this weekend?
I want to go see Oppenheimer really bad, and I think the wife does too. But and honestly, we saw a trailer for Barbie a couple weekends ago when we went and saw Dial of Destiny, and even my wife and I kind of looked at each other and was like, that didn't look half bad. Like, I mean,
it's fun. It's fun. Yeah, I saw it. My girlfriend and I went last night, dressed all pink and everything for it, and we got they were giving away some posters and little buttons and stuff. It was actually pretty cool.
Yeah.
What about you, Jay?
Yeah, I'll be seeing Oppenheimer on Tuesday next week. I'm gonna be doing the full IMAX. My dad and I always love going to the big IMAX theater, so I'm really excited for that. I was also really happy to catch Mission Impossible this Tuesday before it left the IMAX theater. That was a lot of fun
this week to drag down the Mission Impossible good vibes.
Yeah, no, I had a lot of fun with that one as well. I think that one one of the better Mission Impossible movies. And so yeah, as far as Oppenheimer, yeah, really excited for that one as well. I'm probably not gonna see Barbie. I'm not sure if I'm the demographic, but I'll definitely get I'll definitely check it out on streaming if and when it does occur.
That's awesome. Well, we are a Star Wars show, and I thought that this week, we don't have a ton of news going on right now in the Star Wars world. So we can get into a deep dive of kind of the books that have come out recently, some of the books that are coming out in the next few months, kind of get an update, see where everyone's at in the world of the comics, because there's a big crossover coming out this fall as well. But we might as well start with the book that came out this week, Inquisitor, Rise of the Red Blade, and that was written by Delilah Dawson. Now, Jay, you wrote the review on Star Wars Newsnet for everyone. So could you give a spoiler-free synopsis first? I mean, your heading on here says it makes you glad that the Jedi Order fell. So I'm gonna need you to dive into that a little bit, and then I know Brian and I are big Star Wars book people, so we might pick your brain on some non-spoilery stuff. But could you dive in on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So Inquisitor Rise of the Red Blade takes the character that was briefly introduced in Charles Soule's Darth Vader comic issues 19 and 20. But if you haven't read that, that's completely okay, because this is a standalone book that focuses primarily on a red alien named Iskat Ikaris, who kind of has this moment of questioning of the Jedi Order, and kind of actually doubting and maybe asking these questions that the Jedi aren't comfortable with her asking in regards to the Clone Wars. So this takes place during the Clone Wars period, and it's really interesting. Like you pointed out in my review, I honed in on the aspect about the criticism towards the Jedi, especially over the past few years, especially with the Clone Wars, in regards to the role of the Jedi, in regards to what they were doing in the Clone Wars. And all in all, like, I think if you go into this kind of, obviously for those who know, or for those who have read Charles Soule's Darth Vader comics, you know a little bit about this character. And you know straight from the bat that this is a character who starts off as a Jedi, but later becomes a Sith. And a majority of the book does focus on her time as a Jedi. But I think, again, the real interesting meat of that book is her turn to the Inquisitor side, to the dark side, what drives her there. And also, just the fact that, okay, here was a group of individuals who were authoritative and controlling and weren't welcoming at all, but then she joins another group that's even more destructive and even more evil.
What are your thoughts on that synopsis after hearing it, Brian?
Sounds sick, dude. I know which character he's talking about. This sounds awesome, dude. I've been wanting a hang on. Oh, get out of here, you little crap. Oh, my cat's in here. Let's be down here. No, I've been wanting a book for a while that focuses more on the bad guys. And so, the last time I read a book that really focused on the villains was it wasn't even a canon book that I can think of. It was Darth Bane, Path of Vengeance, and that whole trilogy, which was an awesome trilogy, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Love that trilogy. And so, I mean, we've had, Lords of the Sith and stuff like that, but I mean, it wasn't focused on the villains. And so this is something I'm really looking forward to. I saw your review, I saw the I saw a review, the review said the book will make you hate the Jedi. It'll make you understand why the Jedi needed to go. I'm looking forward to that. That's what I want. And so the fact that they did a book on ever since they announced this thing, I've been excited. So yeah, that sounds absolutely perfect. That sounds great.
That's awesome. One of my questions, Jay, would be, so one of my fears, not necessarily fears going into the book, but like almost trepidations, and for what I've heard from some others, is that the Clone Wars kind of time period is something that we've just dived into so much, over the last, several years. We had the Clone Wars season 7. So there was a lot of Clone Wars talk. You had the Brotherhood book that came out recently. There's been the Padme books that have come out. And so some things that I was thinking about or hearing was, is this book a fresh enough take on what's going on in the Clone Wars to justify us kind of diving in right away? Or is it, because I think what some people I've seen have been like, oh, more Clone Wars, do I really need to like read this? So like, what would you say about that?
I would say that what really separates this book from many of those is just the fact that, well, like Brian was pointing out, like, we haven't gotten a book that focuses on the villain's perspective in a long while. Of course, all those other books are great, that you mentioned, the Queen trilogy focusing on Padme, Brotherhood, which focuses on Obi-Wan and Anakin in their younger years. But I like that entire the book itself is one that I really like. Even though I was reviewing it, for Star Wars Newsnet, I had trouble like putting it down because like I wanted to know, like what was gonna happen next, because like I said, that Iscott turns. It's right there in on the cover and in the title. But it's finding out like all these little details about like these little things that bother her, or that kind of get under her skin. And like, for instance, like talking about the Clone Wars and talking about like even in the animated series, if I could just like talk about Mace Windu, he does make an appearance in this in the book, and I think that this doesn't dive into spoiler territory much, but like he's a character that we have seen in the Clone Wars kind of be re-examined, and we kind of realize, oh, this guy's a bit of a jerk. Especially in like his treatment of like Anakin and towards Ahsoka. In in season 7, we see him, calling Ahsoka, like that is not none of your concern, citizen, right? And so we're a lot of like, I think that this kind of re-examination of those little details of like these, like re-examining like the Jedi as like these masters in these ivory towers, not actually thinking too much about the Jedi and the Padawans who are going through this, galactic war, and not really considering too much about the lives at stake. Of course,
Right.
like Mace Windu and like some of those other arrogant Jedi are a bit of like the bad apples within the crate. But I think that there is a lot here that, for those who are willing to kind of just step back and maybe re-examine their perspective on things, I think it is a very fresh book for people who are interested.
I love that perspective of knowing like this is going to happen and just kind of getting that too. It reminds me, if you guys read Lost Stars by Claudia Gray, and from the beginning, like just the way it is that Sienna and Thane, like they're gonna eventually be butting heads on different sides of the conflict, and you're reading and it's going to happen, but it still breaks your heart watching them get torn apart like that. And I will say this, I feel bad for Mace Windu treatment sometimes. Like the poor guy just gets a bad rap.
What's cool though is, Jay, you were talking about, basically perspective and point of view, which is something that Lucasfilm has really focused on during this new era of Star Wars. Ever since Rebels came out, and that was the first bit of Star Wars stuff. Ever since then, we've been getting this side of the Empire, right? And the side of the Rebel Alliance. Remember in the original Star Wars, it says the evil Galactic Empire in the opening crawl, right? I mean, it drew the battle lines down the center, evil, good. Now we're in an era where there's kind of this gray area for both sides, and they've humanized the Empire. They've kind of villainized the Rebel Alliance once in a while, and it's all from your point of view. And, they're releasing books from a certain point of view of different stories for, for the classic trilogy. And so this perspective, this certain point of view thing, that one line Obi-Wan said in Return of the Jedi is, from a certain point of view, that is just blown up now into this awesome, it's given us so much cool stuff. And so from the point of view of a Jedi who is being disrespected by Mace Windu and these other arrogant Jedi, and that's what forces them down that path, that sounds awesome, dude. That sounds absolutely awesome.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think like even holding on to like what you said about the re-examination of this time period, what I found was really interesting too, just recently, was the fact that in the new Star Wars timeline, they've classified this period as the fall of the Jedi. This is,
it's not even the Clone Wars.
Yeah, it's not even the Clone Wars. Well, even before like the prequels, like I think a lot of people were coming into the prequels, in the late 90s, mid to late 90s, thinking like, okay, we're gonna see the Jedi at the height of their power. We're gonna see like multiple Jedi, and they're gonna be so cool and everything, and have all these cool Force abilities. We did see that, but we also saw them, like that the timeline says now, during their fall, when they're on their decline, and when they were also, very much so at the peak of their hubris, and I think a lot of people have come around to realize like, oh no, I think George Lucas did intend to show that this was them being a little bit arrogant.
They were the thing about the prequels is that we see the Jedi never ahead of the curve or anything. They're always reactive. And Jay, that is a perfect segue to talk about when the Jedi were actually possibly at the height of their enlightenment, so to speak. Before we move on to that time period, just remember Inquisitor, Rise of the Red Blade. Delilah Dawson wrote it. Jay, if you had to give it like a rating at the end of your review, I don't remember what did you put it like out of 10? What were you saying?
I scored it a 7.5 out of 10. I think it was very good. So like a 7 would be like a good, and then an 8 would be like a great. I put it, in the middle, 7.5. Again, I think that, like, if you're looking if you're willing to, see a different perspective on the Jedi, if you're looking for like a really compelling anti-hero, that's one thing I thought was really a lot of the other Star Wars books, have these ensemble casts, but Inquisitor Rise of the Red Blade only has one main character that you follow
Okay.
all the way through. Because of that, you're really able to understand her decisions, understand her emotions, and it's a great read. So for that reason, like, I really enjoyed it. Um, I did knock down some points because of the writing style and because of some pacing issues. I wish it was there are scenes where I wish it went on for a little bit longer. There are some scenes that had, it been a few more pages. It's a little bit under 300. I was hoping that maybe like around the 400 plus range. That would have been the sweet spot for me, because there are some scenes where it kind of goes through it like really briskly. So because of that, because of the writing and because of like the pacing, some pacing issues, I knocked it down a bit. But I do think it's worthwhile read, and I think it's a really interesting character study.
Sweet. That's awesome. So moving on to the High Republic now, I believe if we're going to talk about density and quantity of work there are about 800, I think, High Republic novels that are now on sale. Unfortunately for my bank account, I've purchased all of them. Now, are you guys both through? Now we have Phase 3 coming up in 118 days. Is when my High Republic Eye of Darkness tracker tells me. But Phase 3. So for those not familiar, Phase 1 and Phase 2 are set very differently. So Phase 1 kind of gives us our present day High Republic storyline. Phase 2 goes backwards 150 years, and then Phase 3 is going to pick up right where Phase 1 left off, essentially. So are you guys both like caught up on Phase 1?
Yes.
At least? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we can talk a little Phase 1,
the
and then maybe
all the way
I
through.
can sell you a little bit on some more Phase 2 stuff that's to come. And then we can even talk some Phase 3. So High Republic overall, Phase 1, because we're going to be picking up Phase 3. So we're all familiar with that. What are your initial impressions? What are you expecting moving forward in terms of what we're going to see here in just a few months? Brian, you go ahead with that. Yeah.
Hopefully it's no more buildup and it's all payoff. Hopefully all of these, because they really they Star Wars trilogy these phases. They really did. They did the original trilogy and then they went back into the prequels, and now they're going back and doing the sequels. I hope it's all payoff, and I hope it's really. I mean, the last time when we left the Jedi at the end of Phase 1, they were in such a dark spot. It was almost, we should have known then that Phase 1 or Phase 2 was going to go back, because Phase 1 felt so much like by the time it ended, it felt like the end of a second act. And so I'm looking forward to seeing where they're going to go from there, because I think Yoda had the last line of dialogue in Phase 1,
right,
in the novels, talking about the Jedi of the past, and those are the lessons they're going to end up learning from. So I'm just now starting. I'm like 6 or 7 chapters into Convergence.
Okay.
The very first book chronologically for Phase 2. So it's the very first novel on the canon timeline right now, and so I can't put it down. I love it. So like I just started it, and I already can't stop. So
I'm sorry we had to force you to put it down to come talk for a little bit. No.
Hopefully, I'm hoping to get it done this weekend and start kicking them out pretty quick, because I want to be caught up by the time Phase 3 starts, because I want to enjoy that one as it's coming out with everybody else. This one I didn't get a chance to. I got behind on my novels a little bit, but I am looking forward to Phase 3 quite a bit. I'm kind of curious how it's gonna all get tied up with a nice ribbon. The Nihil, I think, are an awesome antagonist. I'm a Viking guy anyway. If you couldn't tell from the beard and the hair, I'm a Viking anyway. So Space Vikings is probably the coolest thing I could have asked for a Star Wars villain. So I'm excited to see how this is going to go with the eye and everything, moving into phase 3.
Brian, did you read Path of Deceit?
Yeah. Wait, no, not yet. Is that phase 2?
Yeah,
Phase
it's
2.
Cabin Scott. Yeah,
Yeah, I haven't
phase
got there
2
yet.
too.
I haven't got there yet.
So
So all the phase 2 books are out, right?
right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've got all of them. And so I just haven't started them yet. I was getting caught up on other books while I was buying these, and I actually kind of skipped some of the books so that I could read all of phase 2 and just binge it.
Yeah, because Tyler, is Path of Deceit before Convergence? Or
Yeah, so Path of Deceit is a little before
Is it?
Convergence. Now it's Convergence is like the adult novel. Path of Deceit's the young adult novel. And there's some, you know how with the High Republic there are some times where some of
Yes.
those can overlap and then be
Yeah.
before. I would say that Path of Deceit is not, I wouldn't call it essential reading for Convergence. That's something I do like about the High Republic is that each young adult, the adult novels, you can read those through and follow the storyline exactly how each other, age group is experiencing it. You're just experiencing it in a different way. So you're not going to be falling behind.
Okay.
You're not going to read Convergence, then go read Path of the Sea, be like, oh, I know everything that's happened here. It's not going to be like that at all. It's going to be, you're going to notice a few things, but it's not going to be, dang, this book is ruined for me. Nothing like that.
Because there were parts in phase 1 too where between the young adult novel, I think it was during the fair on Valo, there were scenes between Mission to
Disaster.
Yeah, something. Crash Point Tower, I think.
Mission to Crash Point Tower.
Yeah, I think, and then the one with the Republic Fair. There was one scene where one character crossed over, and I remember reading the young adult book afterwards, and I saw the same dialogue. I'm like, whoa! So I went back and I pulled it up, and actually, line for line dialogue. This book was happening the same time this one was happening,
right?
But over there, and so they just kind of, and it was kind of cool the way they were doing it.
Happen.
Yeah,
that will happen in the young adult. Not so much in the first books, but in phase 2, there's not trilogies. They just have pairs for this one. So like phase 2, young adult just has 2, and the second book for each basically take place at the same exact time. But the first 2 take place different times.
Okay. I like it. I dig it.
So Jay, what were your thoughts on phase 1? It's because you just started phase 2 as well.
Yeah, no. I just wanted to respond to MB Wilson, who was saying Convergence starts off, like it gets better as it goes on. It was a slow start at first for them. I would say like I felt that way about Path of Deceit. Actually, when I was reading that, because that's the one that establishes like the path of the open hand, and that's the one that really gets into like the religious cultish territory, which I thought was really interesting. But anyways, back to phase 1 though. I will say, it's funny, Brian, when you pointed out the trilogies, where they start off the original trilogy, then go back and do the prequels. I didn't think about it that way, but then when you brought that out, I was like, oh no, like no, duh,
Star Wars does it. Star Wars again.
yeah, totally, right. But no, like I what's funny was I liked I don't know about you guys, but Light of the Jedi I wasn't so hopped up on. Like I enjoyed it. And I thought it was a really good book, but I really enjoyed Rising Storm, which is the second one after that, right? Rising Storm, that was when it really kicked into high gear for me, where I was like, okay, you got the politics with the chancellor, the Great Fair, and then you have like the senator. There's a Senator Toon, I believe, who's like being like, no, we shouldn't extend out into the Outer Rim. That's when I was like, oh, this is just the Wild West for Star Wars. This is them. Yeah, this is them extending out into the frontier. And then, then the Nihil kind of like, then that thread actually made more sense in my head. And when I first read, Live of the Jedi, I was like, these villains, they're not that intimidating. I don't get what's so great about these guys. But then, then you get into Rising Storm, and then you get into Fallen
Oh,
Star.
I love Fallen Star.
Yeah. I
Really?
Loved it.
Fallen Star.
Titanic and Star Wars, yes.
It was. I think it was my least favorite of the adults, and I liked. I liked Midnight Horizon so much more. But I can get into that in a second. But sorry, Jay.
Dude, Midnight Horizon is the reason I'm so far behind. I just did not want to read it. So bad.
So I think so if I was to rate, I guess if I was to like rate the phase 1, it would go Rising Storm at the top, Fallen Star, and then Light of the Jedi. But like you guys were saying earlier, I think that by the time you finish the what was funny was I didn't even realize the whole phase 1, phase 2 thing until I finished Fallen Star, because I was like, wait, what? Like it ends on a cliffhanger. I'm like, wait, what? Because I thought like this was the end. Like I thought that was the end with the Fallen Star. I didn't realize like, oh no, they're gonna continue on in phase 3. But overall, like I enjoyed it. I enjoyed also even like the Wayfinders and how it goes into like the different sides of the different factions of the Jedi. Like you have different people like going down different paths. Or is it Wayfinders? Yeah. Which is who Orla is. All of that, all of these little intricacies really help lay into the lore and provide more depth to the story as a whole. Yeah.
Wow, I still like shook by the Fallen. I didn't realize. I love that people love Fallen Star. So part of my problem was I see Claudia Gray's name attached to a book, and the Way Seekers thing. I see Claudia Gray's attached to a book, and I'm like, this is going to be awesome. I think of Bloodline. I think of Lost Stars. I think of Princess Leia of Alderaan. I think of some of my favorite Star Wars books. And my problem with Fallen Star is what I really wanted from that book was to see the big three together. Like I wanted to see Elzar, Avar, and Stellan have time where we see the three of them together. We haven't really gotten that at all. In all of phase 1, we never really got that. We saw, Elzar and Avar together for a little bit, or Elzar and Stellan for a little bit, or Stellan and Avar interact. We never saw all three of them kind of do this, but they were talked about as a trio a lot. And the whole Titanic thing, it just felt, the pacing in that book to me just felt like it went on like 100 pages too long. It just didn't hit for me as much when it finally fell. It was like, okay, I've been knowing this is going to happen, and it wasn't just handled in the way that I was expecting from Claudia Gray. I read it in a day and a half, which it wasn't bad by any means, but for me, Light of the Jedi and Rising Storm were books where when I finished, I immediately had to talk to someone like, I have finished this book. Have you finished this book? Let's chat. So that was my problem. Midnight Horizon, though, was one of my favorites, Brian. It was like this murder, like mystery thriller with this incredible fight at the end, and then Reith is fighting for his life, and then Yoda comes in like the hero that he is, and
after he's been missing. Yeah.
After he's been missing for so long, and it's like, whoa, that he's there. And oh man, that just. So this is actually a funny story real quick. I was reviewing Midnight Horizon first for the site, and I thought the embargo date for my calendar, I put the date as like a week past what it actually was.
What a boy.
And hey Sydney, glad you could join. So I put the date wrong. And I just get a message from, I think it was Val or one of the other guys. And he goes, hey, I don't see anything written in the drafts yet for Midnight Horizon. Is that gonna be ready for tomorrow? And this is around like 3:00 in the afternoon. And I'm like, what is he talking about? So I go look at my message and it's like, oh, that's tomorrow. I look at my phone and it says 50% completed, like reading. And I said, all right, cancel my appointments. We are done today. Go in the corner. And it was like 3 a.m. I'm like just going into town on this thing. I'm glad I liked the book, or that could have been maybe it was I forced myself to like it so much.
I don't know how you do that, man. Because Jay, this is the guy who read the entire Thrawn Ascendancy trilogy in 12 days.
No.
Yes,
It could happen.
I have no idea how he did it. There's no way. I'm like tempted to call BS. But
It was my life.
Something about him that I believe him.
That was my life in the evenings for 12 days. I'd be on my lunch break from work, Thrawn, Lesser Evil. We get home, Thrawn, Lesser Evil. We stay up all night. I didn't watch football really for like 12 days. And during football season, that's how I'm committed. Emmy Wilson
trilogy.
The End of
That
Rising
is
Storm.
The beefy trilogy, though. Yeah.
End of Rising Storm. That was brutal. I think that was the most emotionally like wrecked I've been in a Star Wars book, maybe ever. Just after Bell, and Loden being separated, and then Loden coming in. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I was wrecked when I was reading that.
In Loden Greatstorm, like from the very beginning, from Light of the Jedi, he was my favorite character. I loved Loden Greatstorm. I was like, dude, this guy's awesome. He's gonna be such a badass through this whole thing. And then I was like, he's so awesome. Then no, I'm like, you gotta be kidding me, dude. And then when you start, and then like as if that wasn't bad enough, then you start reading some of the High Republic comics, and then it's like you open one of them and page one is Loden Greatstorm, like all like,
oh man, I remember.
It's like, oh crap, come on, really? And it's like, you ain't got to rub salt in the wound, man. But yeah, no, I love it. So my co-host for my podcast, he lives in Egypt. He hasn't read any of the High Republic stuff yet. He's looking forward to it. And I told him, I think he's wanting to binge it all. And I told him, when you start with phase 1, get attached to every single character you can. Just love them all. Get attached to every single one of them. Just ride the ride, dude. It's gonna be awesome. So.
Oh my gosh, this is like a deep cut right here with Loden, but I have a fantasy football league that's like Disney themed, and so I'm like, I'm gonna come up with so everyone has like their team name is after a character that's from Disney, so a lot of it's like your mainstream stuff, and my team name is the Loden Greatstorms. Yes. And when I put a picture of Loden as my team figure, they're all like, what are you talking about? Like, who is this? And I'm like, you don't know about this? What are you talking about?
Unacceptable.
Oh, the Loden and Bell story and Tales of Light and Life's gonna be awesome.
I'm excited.
Can you put Nate's other one back up there for a second?
Yeah. Here we go.
What do we think about this one, guys?
I kind of see where he's coming from, but I disagree. I really like Rising Storm all the way through. So I can see why he feels that way, though.
I can see why he feels that way too. I actually
don't agree with him.
So what I'll say is like, actually, like, I think like the part that I think people might find really boring though, but I actually really liked was the relationship between Elzar and Stellan. The relationship between those two I thought was super fascinating, and the way even like and Elzar, the romance that he shares with that other girl that was assisting with the whole fair, the Great Fair. I thought that because when I was going through Light of the Jedi, I was like, I didn't really think much of Elzar. I was like, this guy's such like a Boy Scout. He's not really that interesting. I don't really see what's so great about him. But then I read Rising Storm, and then he has like he gets into a relationship, and then he also has like dark side powers. He taps into dark side later on, and then that right there, I think I appreciate like nuanced Jedi who aren't always binary light side or dark side.
Yeah,
I love Elzar because to me he reminds me so much of like what Anakin could have been, just in the sense of having friends that were there that he confided in, that trusted him, and a Jedi Order that kind of put their arms around him and supported him versus, what we see in the prequels where Anakin's like, I can't actually go to these people to talk about my problems because they had gotten so dogmatic and, rigid. Just everything from the way seekers and everything. I love Elzar. Like I said before, I just wish we had seen the three of them together more in that. It's just they're just like a trio. To me, it's kind of like it's not the same character dynamics at all. But in the Clone Wars, we get so much of Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Ahsoka together doing like trio missions in a sense. And I was kind of hoping whether it be some standalones in the comics or one of the books, even where the three of them would team up finally and do something together. And I don't know if you guys have read the excerpt or the synopsis for The Eye of Darkness. So like at the end of Fallen Star, like Marchion Rose declared that area, his and Elzar and Avar are together again. But the synopsis for Eye of Darkness is Avar is inside the Nile territory led by Marchion, and Elzar is in Republic territory, and they're separated again. And I'm sure they have a really good reason for them being separated again. And it's going to have a lot of tension there with Elzar wanting to go save Avar. But it drove me insane for about 2 seconds when I read that. Because I'm like, why can't they just be together doing something? But that's neither here nor there. What do you guys think about Marchion Ro as the figurehead villain for Phase 1?
Go ahead, Jay.
I can't figure him out. Like, I think he when you read, I think some of the other stuff, highlights him a little bit better than the mainline books, than the adult books. I think if you like dive into like some of the manga and some of the comics, he has like a better representation. But when you're reading, I don't know, like I couldn't really wrap my head around, what's his angle. But I'm like a little bit ways into Phase 2, so I can I'm kind of like piecing it together, like his backstory and his genealogy. I'm not, obviously, again, I haven't finished all of Phase 2 yet, so maybe this is a question to like we can talk about once I finish those. But I think overall, like visually, in those books, and when he's drawn, I think he looks cool. I think like seeing him with Loden's lightsaber in Eye of Darkness, that looks great.
How dare he?
Right? He's like like just like stands up, like what's up with the lightsaber. I think he looks great visually, and but I think that some of his motivations. That's a great comment. Yeah, Marchion Ro gives me Tommy Shelby vibes. That's great. I don't know. Like I think that there's something about him where like I kind of want to just like explore, like maybe this will happen more in Phase 2, but I really hope we can get more into like the meat and bones behind like his motivations and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Cillian Murphy,
like on all the
Murphy stars as Marchion Ro in the live action deal to really put his Tommy Shelby vibes into Marchion Ro's character. What do you think? What do you think of him, Brian?
No, I like him. He's honestly. So here's the thing: like he never gets mad, right? I mean, he gets mad, but he never like yells, screams, stomps, right? Mm-hmm. I had a drill sergeant like that when I was in the Army, and I'll tell you what, that was the most terrifying fucking thing it could have possibly been. In basic training, you have a drill sergeant that just walks around and he's just like, gentlemen, and he's just like, he tells you messed up without yelling at you, and then like smokes you right without yelling, and it's terrifying. So that when he does finally break, you're like, oh, and so I don't really do audiobooks, so I don't know. which one did I listen to? Maybe it was the Tempest Runner. I think it's what I listened to.
Probably.
But he had such a weird voice. But then the longer I went on and listened to it, the more I was like, I get it. Like this guy is just, I don't know. Like Jay had it's hard to get a good read on him. And what his motivations are and why he's doing what he's doing, other than his dad did it. You know, and so
there is and it gets into Path of Deceit. Path of Deceit and just the phase 2 in general, and the side of the family where the Nile essentially come from and where he's going to come from. There is a deep-rooted loathing and history of the Jedi from them that they dive into in his heritage a little more, and that kind of adds a little bit of perspective on it. But with the fact it is 150 years in the past, you don't get like that direct, line of him learning about that. It's more of like, wow, there's 150 years of hatred brewing that has culminated in this guy. I love it because in a lot of the Star Wars publishing and in most of the Star Wars mediums for the last several years, it was, either a Clone Wars centered conflict or an Empire centered conflict with, Dooku, Sidious, Vader. Those are your main villains. And some of the, we've had some different things in Bounty Hunter comics and things like that. But it was so cool to see, like you said, Space Vikings led by a dude that just does not care about anything, but basically his own personal vendetta. And it was just a nice breath of fresh air, because I was like you guys too early on. There's like a scene in Live the Jedi when he basically kind of gives his speech to the Nile and then basically cuts one of the Tempest runners loose. I'm forgetting his name right now, but that's when I was like, okay, he's that dude. He's that dude. So you guys are both early on phase 2. I want to try to just sell you on why you should read phase 2 in 12 days. We'll do the Thrawn Ascendancy approach. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. So something that I don't know if you guys are into this, but something I love in Star Wars is when they yes, thank you, Nate. I forgot about his name. That helps. Gosh, I hated that guy, but I was like, man, I don't know if he deserved to go out like that. That was tough. So phase 2, something I love in Star Wars is when they dive into like real romance and kind of the hope against all odds romance that persists in that. And phase 2 gives so much of that, especially in the adult novels, really, and Convergence and Cataclysm. And it kind of gives you that feeling that, above all else, we are going to figure this out. And it made me feel like kind of the original trilogy, where especially the main characters you see in Convergence, it kind of took me back to the original trilogy of not necessarily love, because you have Han and Leia, sure, but that idealism and the hope that this small group of people can overcome this galactic-wide conflict or this major conflict that seems so beyond them. And that's what I love about really Convergence and Cataclysm, is kind of that hope piercing through vibes. But if you were expecting, and I'm sure you weren't, any sort of emotional reprieve in terms of character attachment, you better, just like you told your friend from Egypt, Ryan, go for the ride, because it's going to get you into it again. I put Cataclysm. It's right up there with me. It might be my second favorite High Republic book of all of them. Convergence was really good. Path of Deceits. Really solid. I think Path of Vengeance was my least favorite of the 4, but I really enjoyed it. But I think it was my least favorite of the 4, which surprised me because of how much I like Kevin Scott.
Yeah.
But I think the Path of the Open Hand is actually a better villain that I've enjoyed more so than the Nile.
Really?
But I think that maybe Marky and Rowe as a sole villain I enjoy more, but as a group, I really have enjoyed the Path of the Open Hand, and they're just in stark contrast from the Jedi, which you'll get into that as you read. But did you have, now, Jay, you said that did you read Path of Deceit first? Did you have a hard time getting into it at first?
No, I I really enjoyed Path of Deceit. Same with you, Tyler, where when maybe it's because of like my religious background, but like when I got into Path of Deceit and I realized like, oh, this is a religious cult that is deceiving its members in very subtle ways with a matriarchal prophetess. I was like, oh, this is really intriguing. I really enjoy the mother as an overall villain. I think that she's again, that like the subtleties. What I really liked about the Path of the Open Hand and about the mother is like those subtleties that you can kind of like are red flags that you can also see in like some other like cultish leaders or like in some other what did he call it? Like pyramid scheme, like those people that try to recruit you into like pyramid schemes, where some of it is just a little bit too good to be true, and they're trying to recruit you and you're like, I'm good, and so that's I actually really like phase 2 for that reason. I think that like the Path of the Open Hand, from what I've read so far, is a very compelling villain compared to the Nihil. And you're right, it's the group collective nature of it. It's because like I think also too, like from the point of the Nihil, like there was something weird about like these group of just anarchists that like are hopped up on drugs and like are drinking and always partying, and so yeah. I mean, when you made the Viking comparison, I was like, oh, okay, that makes a little bit more
They
sense.
got death sticks galore in Nile,
So because of that, like I think like the Nile wasn't so much of a compelling group for me, in that sense, because I was like, okay, I can't really exactly relate to this too much. But the Path of the Open Hand, on the other hand, I'm like, oh, okay, this is a group that I think that could like that in some ways we do see a little bit of that in our own world as well. And so because of that, I was like, okay, I can get on board with this a bit more.
They're so intricately tied to the Jedi, but being completely anti whatever the Jedi do. They don't get into it a ton in Convergence, but so Brian, Path of Deceit is kind of like the book that lays out who the Path of the Open Hand are and why they are so different from the Jedi. Essentially, they view using the Force in any way as essentially like it's like an act of terrorism to them. It's like it is just absolute blasphemy, like loathing. They feel as if you are destroying the galaxy itself, like as you're doing that.
That does sound really good.
Well, yeah, like going back to what I was saying too about like like the binary point of view between the Jedi and the Sith. I thought the Path of the Open Hand was really interesting. And like I love that about Phase 2 is that it does dive into some of those non-binary followers of the Force who don't see it as just being purely good or like purely evil.
Right.
And I read the High Republic Phase 2 comic books for the site. I've done like a review of issue 7. But that's another, that comic book too, where they're on Jeddah and they talk about these other Force users. There's a group that uses the Force to control fire. There's a group that uses the Force to control plant life. That to me is like really interesting. And, the fact that they're like, oh no, this guy's a Sith. And then he's like, no, I'm not. I just believe in the dark side of the Force. Or, they call the Force other things too, right?
See, I love that.
Yes.
I love that. They've hinted that with some of the Luke Skywalker stuff.
Yeah, I think that to me is the best part of like Phase 2 is seeing some of these other factions and these other sects, right? And that don't believe in again the light side or the dark side, but rather like they're somewhere in the middle, or they they just have these completely different beliefs from others, like the path of the open hand, right? Whereas it's like, no, don't use the force at all. This is, we can't use the force at all, which is, it's like, wow, we've never seen this before.
That's really cool. You've got me. Like, if I wasn't already hooked on this book and ready to get through this phase, I am now.
What are you hoping to get most out of phase 2, Brian? Like, if you like, as you're going in, because you're 6 chapters in, what do you need / want to get out of like phase 2?
Oh God, it sounds like I'm going to get it. You guys are talking about how compelling, the path of the open hand is and everything. I want a compelling villain, and it sounds like we're going to be getting it. I love seeing the Jedi in their prime, like during this golden age of Jedi. I love that. And, we got introduced to all these characters in phase 1, and that's great. Great characters, awesome storytelling, great characters. But then you back up. Now you're getting introduced to another group of new characters. And I love that. I love the universe expanding and building and even going back and forth in the timeline like that. So I really don't know what to expect out of it. But I'm looking forward to it. And like I said, compelling villains, man, and just make my jaw hit the floor while I'm reading a book. It's hard to make my jaw hit the floor when I'm reading a book. And it's happened a few times reading some of the canon stuff, even some of the High Republic stuff, but make it happen again.
Tyler, what did you make of the mother, by the way? If I'll get into spoilers.
Right.
What did you think of her as a villain overall for phase 2?
It's hard to get into it without getting the specifics. I want Brian to go into the mother and just be like, but she was. I hated her more than I hated Markian Rowe. Just because of Markian Rowe manipulates people for his own game, but he kind of feeds into the whole Nile thing with the mother. It's a deeper, preying upon someone, because it's preying upon like a religious belief. It's preying upon like the best in what some people. She's like, you see the best. She sees the best in that person and uses that against like their actual like what you see with Marta in Path of Deceit, and what she does, because the idealism of the Path of the Open Hand is we are a benevolent group that just believes that the Force should not be used for personal gain, is I guess anyway. But she uses that and turns it into, we are going to absolutely smash anyone who believes otherwise. She turns that, doctrine into and weaponizes it, which is what we see from a lot. And that kind of makes it just a little more personal, because I think a lot of people can think of times in their life where they've seen either someone they know or themselves have like religion weaponized, like either against them or, in some way. And so I think that's something that just makes her such a vindictive character that I just loathe entirely.
That's
for
a
number of reasons.
What villains you absolutely hate?
She's a character that I love to hate, though. You know?
With Markian Rowe, I loved hating Markian Rowe. I just never want him to die, because I've enjoyed like it. So whenever he does get his, it's gonna be great. With the mother, it was like every second I'm reading, it's like someone just lightsaber her head clean off. Like, let's go, like do something. Like, it was the more that you kind of peel back the curtain, right? Because they do a good job at first. She's like the aura around her, and then they just keep peeling back layer by layer. To wrap up High Republic, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say she's like a wolf in sheep's clothing, right? Mm-hmm. She's that kind of villain, which I found was like a bit more compelling when compared to Markian Rowe.
Mm-hmm. I can't wait for Brian to get into some phase 2.
I'm gonna buzz through it, dude, and you'll know when I start kicking through it, because I want to talk about it.
Okay, so Nate just dropped a good talking point, which I think kind of launches into what I was hoping we could wrap up our conversation with, because we got a few minutes left. So, Tales of Light and Line, we got the San Diego Comic-Con publishing panels going on tomorrow. So there's a few projects that are coming out for Star Wars over the next few months. next week we see Tales of Light and Light's ebook come out, where we'll learn kind of about the fate of Buryaga, which I think
Finally,
people have been clamoring for, figure out what happened to our favorite Wookiee Jedi, and that's really exciting. But the Dark Droids comic arc that's happening, I don't know how familiar you guys are with all the comics essentially, but this is our new big crossover where like the entity, the Scourge, is trying to take over the galaxy and corrupting droids, and who better to combat, someone who could better to combat droids than the great R2D2 and members of D Squad from Clone Wars, as Corporal Whack is going to make his reappearance, which just gives me endless amount of joy. Chopper will also be making his appearance in that. IG-88 is going to be a part of this group, and I think 4LOM is going to be in this group. It's just an crazy ensemble cast of droids.
Please be better than Screaming Citadel.
And I saw there was an interview that Charles Soule had on Star Wars Explained, where he basically said that if you want Charles Soule's opinion and like inner opinion, full-blown thoughts on droids and how they belong in the Star Wars universe, you'll want to read Dark Droids. And there's tie-ins and Bounty Hunters, Dr. Aphra, the regular Star Wars titular series right now. Apparently General Grievous is involved in this somehow. There was an alternate cover that involved Grievous. Now, it has not said if General Grievous is actually around or if this is going to be some sort of flashback involving something. I would assume it's going to be something like that. But just the fact that, the cover of Grievous on it, it's going to be a massive crossover event. So I want to know, for you guys, thoughts on D Squad coming back, thoughts on this, crossover event in general. What are you looking forward to in the comic crossover realm? And are we going to learn anything else at the publishing panel tomorrow?
Bring on Dark Droids, dude. I've been wondering what this was going to be ever since that first line, first it comes for the medal came out. I was like, I was wondering like, what in the hell could that possibly? And so this sounds cool. There's a lot happening between Empire and Jedi, though. Mm-hmm. There is the longer these comics go, the more. That was an action-packed year, man. I tell you what. It sounds freaking awesome. Bring on D Squad. Bring it on Chopper, bring on IG, bring it all of them, dude. Just bring it on. As far as out of the paneling or out of the publishing panel tomorrow, I'm hoping, and it was teased. I think Timothy Zahn teased it not too long ago about possibly doing another Thrawn trilogy set after the events of Ahsoka, or even before, between Rebels and Ahsoka, you know what I mean? Kind of where they've been and everything. And with Ahsoka coming out in just a few weeks, and that series will have been wrapped up by the beginning of October. There's no reason we couldn't get maybe the start of another Thrawn trilogy announced somewhere next year. Would be awesome.
I'll be revved up and ready if so.
Yes. So I'm hoping. Odds of it happening, I'm going to say 40%, but no, I'll say 30%. I'm not really optimistic, but I'm a little hopeful. That's just for me personally. But that's the one thing I'm kind of hoping to get something out of.
What are you, Jay?
Yeah. Similar to what Brian was saying, I'm interested to see some of the stuff that I'm just interested to find out about other books that they haven't announced yet. Like Brian said, like you have some of these authors like Timothy Zahn, who aren't part of the High Republic, because we know like where the High Republic is going, and we have a clear outline of the release dates for those books. I'm interested to find out more about the books that we don't know about, right? What's after the High Republic? What's going to come after that wraps up? Are we going to get another publishing initiative? I doubt we're going to get much of that, like just being realistic. I doubt they're going to talk about anything past the High Republic because they want to focus mostly on that. But, like I'd be interested to see if like they make it. I'm always interested in those like standalone books, and the books that kind of go into like the that are just more under the radar. I should say.
Maybe we can get some one-off High Republic stuff with some of the new Jedi that we've been introduced to, because there's a whole world there that we could, like, just a Loden Bell one-off. I would eat that up, but personally,
yeah, no, I totally. Or just, I mean, the odds of this happening are very low, but I got my fingers crossed for Lost Stars too.
Oh yeah, still, dude, we are so far overdue for a Lost Stars 2.
Oh my gosh,
So far.
So I was that Jay kind of So I had two things that I was wanting. These are like my long shot dream scenarios that I would love to hear, because we know about all the High Republic stuff. I'm looking forward to anything they do. I'm hoping for an excerpt for Eye of Darkness maybe to get released. I don't know if it's too soon, or I have my worries about Crimson Climb a little bit. I love Kira and I love her comic book arc, but I have a little bit of concern over the novel itself. But that's for another day.
It's E.K. Johnston though. It's E.K. Johnston writing it, so
I'm actually not an E.K. Johnston
No?
fan.
Oh man,
I did not like 2 of the 3 Padme books. I really
That's
liked
fair.
Queen's Shadow, but Queen's Peril and Queen's Hope
nothing happened.
just did not do it for me at all. And for her to get another one, it just made me go, I'm reviewing it for the site, like I'm all in, but I'm just going in with a little bit of skepticism. What I'm hoping for, and I don't think this is going to happen by any means, the Rey movie is going to be the next thing. The next probably feature blockbuster movie from Star Wars. The Mandoverse movie might come out first, but the one they need to do bonkers numbers on box office wise is the Rey movie. And there's this 10-year or 15-year gap between the movie and Rise of Skywalker. And we don't have any, books or any sort of information on what's happened post Rise of Skywalker. It's only been a few years. So I would love for, before that movie comes out, like a standalone Rey novel, or just something post Rise of Skywalker with Rey and maybe Finn at the forefront. That doesn't necessarily have to be a direct tie-in to that movie that they're going to make and write eventually, but just perhaps gives us a little bit of just, a state of how they're doing, what's going on.
Kind of flesh out the galaxy during that time period leading up to it.
And I would just love just a story of that. Now, I don't think they're going to do that, because I think they're going to wait until that movie comes out to touch anything with that time period, because they don't want to lock anything, in stone. Right. But if we're dreaming big, that would be kind of the one thing that I would love, is give me like a post Rise of Skywalker Rey novel. And if it's written by Claudia Gray, which she's probably too busy with High Republic right now, if it's written by Claudia Gray, I would go ballistic. Or a Lost Stars 2 would probably be top of my dreams. It's just, how can you not, just with the way it leaves off.
And it's like general consensus. It's everybody's favorite Star Wars book.
It's just awesome.
Not everybody, but the general consensus is, anytime you watch a novel ranking or anything like that, Lost Stars is like top 2.
You're right.
Top 3. You know what I mean?
I haven't met someone who doesn't like it.
Yeah, I mean, neither. There's one other thing I would like to see. I really liked the Claudia Gray novel Master and Apprentice, the Qui-Gon Obi-Wan novel.
Oh yeah,
I really liked it. I think it would be really cool, because that book was based off of a short story from the from a certain point of view, 40 short stories for Star Wars. She wrote a short story in there called Master and Apprentice that was old Obi-Wan with Qui-Gon's Force Ghost, and then they commissioned her to write this novel of the young two. I think it would be awesome to get a Master and Apprentice series, and not just Qui-Gon Obi-Wan, but like then we get a novel of Anakin and Ahsoka. Then we get a novel of like Luke and Ben. Like, I think that would be really cool. Luke Skywalker and Ben Solo. Like, give us a mission with them together as Master and Apprentice.
It reminds me of the old like Jedi Apprentice books. Yes. I don't know if you read those along, like with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. They just had these tiny little.
Yeah, but they were good.
You mentioned Master and Apprentice. And this is taking back to High Republic. So there was a line in Master and Apprentice. I don't know why I just remembered this, but there's talking about the prophecies that it gets into. And there was a line in there that she put like from one of the prophecies, and it was like, only through the like loss of many Jedi will the sins against the nameless be made right?
Oh,
And
nice.
it was, I read that, and like this summer, I was just rereading Master and Apprentice just
And that
for
popped out.
fun. And I'm like it probably doesn't mean anything at all, but it just made me
Happy
think like
coincidence.
who else is the who else is the nameless, and like what would that mean, versus like it's just a weird. And just looking when Master and Apprentice was written, it was like she could have had High Republic on her mind at this point when that book was published. Not that it means anything, but it just started making me go, well, if that's connected, what would the sin against the nameless be? Is that something that happened like before? Or are we reading about it in phase one? Like, I don't know. And I don't know. That just struck me. And I'm like,
those little throwaway lines.
It's just I spend way too much time thinking about that. I read that on a cruise where I had no Wi-Fi. I had no one to talk about but my inner self. And it was a deep, hard conversation.
Yeah. I think it'd be a cool series to do. And you could even do some dark side stuff.
Oh, yes.
Do Dooku and Asajj Ventress, I mean, hell, even do Maul and Savage. That'd be an awesome novel. You know what I mean? Like, so, I mean, it'd be kind of tricky placing it. You know what I mean? But I think,
and they don't have to be long either. They can be those short, like these. I love the one-offs. It was like reading Padawan from last year with Obi-Wan. It wasn't, you didn't get a lot of Qui-Gon in that, but it's just a one-off adventure with Obi-Wan going off into this thing. No, that would be sick. That would be awesome. All right. Before we get going, does anyone have any like last thoughts on Star Wars books in general, or anything they got to get off their chest here?
I got to get one last. I will say one last thing, because we're talking about like far-flung wishes for the Star Wars publishing panel tomorrow. I think if we could get something on Dawn of the Jedi, because like we have the movie coming up, and that is a series that has a rich comic history too, right? I think if we can like get news of like, hey, we got a Dawn of the Jedi comic series coming up, or even like a reprint of the old comics, or on some of those old books, I think that would be like one other thing that like I'd be really happy to hear about.
Yeah. So Brian, before we get going, where can people find you? Where you at?
You guys can find me right here at the Star Wars Newsnet. I said last week where I was going to be starting to do the weekly roundup again, and that didn't happen. Personal things going on, but this week we'll be starting the weekly roundup again, talking about all the big news stories throughout the week from StarWarsNewsNet.com. You guys can find me right here every week on Star Wars Newsnet Live, talking about whatever we're talking about for Star Wars. I was rip-roaring ready to go today. As soon as Val messaged us and was like, so are we going? And he tagged me. He's like, Brian, you good? And I'm like, yes, let's do this. Like, I'm ready. So, yeah, I'm here every week. And whether it's you guys or Paul or somebody, I feel like when we do it, I'm the constant that's kind of there every week. So I'm here every week. You guys can follow me on my non-existent, my defunct Twitter account at Brian Miller 1138. I don't tweet anything, but you guys are more than welcome to follow me there. And you guys can follow me on my podcast, the Star Wars Canon Podcast, with my co-host Yusuf Wally. From across the pond, we're getting ready to fire the podcast back up. Haven't done it in a while either, due to same said personal issues. And we're kind of revamping our website a little bit. I can officially announce the name of the new website now. Last week, I kind of teased it a little bit, but I got it all set up, ready to go. It's still under construction, so if you guys go to it, it's not complete yet. It's not finished. It is going to be finished. I'm working on it now. But you guys can check out StarWarsCanon.net.
Nice.
And that's the new website where you can find my show, the Star Wars Canon Podcast. Legends Timeline is there. I'm working on breaking the canon timeline up into all the eras that Disney kind of gave us, and so it's not finished yet. So that's why it still is under construction. So if you go to the timeline and it's not there yet, I'm working on it. I'll get it done here in the next couple of weeks. So we're hoping to come back in the middle of August, get ready to go for the Ahsoka series, and hit the ground running when we come back.
That's awesome. Jay, where can people find you? Like, you got anything cool going on? Like, what's going on?
Well, yeah. Well, no. I'll be still working at Star Wars Newsnet here, and I have my Inquisitor Rise of the Red Blade review that you can check out on our website as well. Again, I give it a 7.5, but if you guys want to read that before you want to pick up the book, by all means.
That's great. I will probably be purchasing that next week as soon as I finish Tales of Light and Life. I just got to get my High Republic fix in first. You guys can follow me at TypeRed5 on Twitter. Because I don't appreciate middle school teenagers that I teach following me on social media. That is the only social media that I have. Unfortunately, students will still find that and try to submit assignments on Twitter. It's a great
That
time.
happens.
It happened. I was at the gym last
I
year,
hate
and and a kid started like tweeting his paper to me, like line by like, and I was just like, "Sonny, you're gonna have to email this to me, in order for it to count. My email's not working, but you're on Twitter anyway."
I don't want to live on this planet anymore.
it's a whole thing. Anyway, yes, you can find me hopefully getting back up with some comics and books here pretty soon on Star Wars Newsnet. Until next time, guys.
May the force be with you.
Always.